9 is going for the universal
it's
symbol,
trying to cover
and also
everything.
the universal symbol that has always existed forever.
Yes.
Mhm.
Maybe it's possible that 4-wing-5 is inventing, actually. Like, there is a way that 4-wing-5 is like self-discovering and inventing themselves and their own perception.
Yeah, because the
That makes
types that
sense.
are double hexading are not wanting to do any of the adapting, so there's more of a I'm the source of it all.
Right. I'm doing the work. I'm taking the brunt for everybody else who's like adapting.
The big hormone enneagram.
I'm John Lekovich, 4-wing-5, sexual self-pres, 458 Trifix.
I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual, 9 with 1 wing, 974 Trifix.
What up, it's Emeka. I'm an 8-wing-7, sexual self-pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I'm a 3-wing-4 self-pres social, a 369 Trifix.
Hi, I'm Alexandra. I'm a social self-preservation 9-wing-1, 963 Trifix.
If you like or hate us, make sure you go like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and make sure you leave us a review.
I felt like last week was a lot of fun, just like riffing and going out of nowhere in a certain way. Like, we haven't done that in a while, and it was good.
Yeah, it was really fun to edit that one. That's a really fun episode. It's one of the most fun that we've done.
Alexandra's appeared on The Prince's Court.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, nice.
It did, I overheard some of it, but they did like clips from what show?
Love is Blind.
Love is Blind, where it's a show where these people are like in a box and they can't talk to each other, or they can only talk to each other, but they can't see each other, and then they
I've seen it.
Okay.
You have seen it.
Unfortunately, of course I've seen it. I was in a relationship.
Oh, yeah.
Part of her attraction display.
Oh, she was blessing me with that one.
Yeah.
Reality TV.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was watching the clips that Alexandra was like when she was figuring out what to get Joseph to splice up for their commentary, and just like how fucking stupid a lot of these people are. And I can imagine it was just very funny because, I mean, just the idiocy encapsulated in a lot of these examples, just amazing.
Yeah, there's like a way that stuff is like great to respond to, because people that don't know that they are their type are already more dramatically their type, you know what I mean? Like more caricature-y.
Yep.
And then you what is it called? You like reduce that pool even more to make it specific to people that would volunteer to be on a reality show, and then you just have the dumbest kind. It's good. It's amazing. They just give you great stuff.
You know, I've realized that's one unintentional effect of doing this podcast is, I mean, it's almost like mixing a bunch of genres. Like, we did create kind of a reality podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Like, people are
It's true.
consuming us as if we're reality show people.
Yeah, right. I didn't think about
It's
that.
true.
That's funny.
They do interact with us as if.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I'm like, oh, this episode doesn't have any information, but it's just like us talking about personal stuff. And I'm like, no, people obsess about that shit.
Oh, yeah.
Like whole Nancy's like, you know, failed move to the Netherlands. People are like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry for Nancy. You know, commenting.
Where were they
like,
saying that?
I think it was just somebody commented that on YouTube.
Oh,
and I'm like, man, people are really caring.
Aw.
We got to let them know that
really funny.
Nancy never moved.
Like
it
a
was just
stranger I have no
part of
connection to.
the saga.
Yeah, right. We just made it up.
The saga we're creating.
Yeah, the producers of the show wanted some drama, so
Yeah.
Only I had made money off of it, and then that would have been great.
So we're going to do 3 wings today, or are we going to just riff on something else?
I'm in a bit of a riff mood myself.
I'm in a riff mood too.
Yeah, let's riff. I'm gonna riff me too. Let's do it.
Yeah. I don't know what could riff about that.
The biggest thing that we've all been thinking about is the Josh's new object relational stuff. It's just all the different ways to play with that. So I've been thinking about that ever since. So if there's any angle that anything interesting that anybody's thought of that won't give away too much from the course.
Go.
I feel like I have a lot of stuff, but it's not like organized.
Yeah. Sammy had a interesting angle. She was looking at the field of each center from the point of view of the triad, and I thought it was it opened something up for me, especially with the superego. We were trying to find the right word for what, because I mean, for example, with drawn types, so we're drawing from the field of, you know, sensation. Like each of the withdrawn types is pulling back to some kind of singular experience of the field. And with the superego, we couldn't find the right word. And I was like, oh, you know what? I think the word judgment, because what is 6 attached to? What is the anxiety? And its attachment to not just orientation, but the judgment of orientation, which is where, you know, all the superego types are in some reaction to the judgment. So 2 is rejection of the judgment of gaze, the superego judgment. And 1 is frustration with, you know, superego judgment. And so the anxiety and the work ethic and am I doing it right and cross-referencing is the anxiety about the judgment of orientation. And the 2 is rejection of that judgment. So I'm rejecting gaze so that I don't have to deal with this judgment that I'm supposed to be loving and good. I'm not even going to register gaze because I'm rejecting. So I was like, oh, that connects some dots as to what the attachment, rejection, and frustration for superego types.
I mean, with 6, that shows up as there's a lot of judgment of, you know, concern about being judged and judging others around which thing you follow, which orientation map you've chosen and which side you're on, right? And that side over there is the bad side and I'm on the good side, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm not totally clear on the language, but what I would say with the 6 thing is, like, you know, you're able to borrow extraneous or exogenous maps to provide orientation, but then you get multiple maps and some of the maps contradict one another. And so then there becomes this, the evaluation thing is really strong, but it's because it is aimed at exogenous sources of orientation that it's going to take on, that has this judgmental quality to it. Whereas, like, and which is right, you know, which is, and, you know, part of the anxiety of the mental types is that the map is never the territory, right? And it's always an approximation and it's always alienated. And so not only which ones am I getting, but are the people or sources that I'm getting the map from good themselves or functioning themselves. Whereas, like, 5 is just cutting off from the exogenous thing and it's like just building it in baby steps on their own. But then with the 1, you know, it's like the 1 is trying to purify the holding environment. They're like agitated in the holding environment. And so there's not only like this specific thing is contaminating my holding environment, but also there's this, you know, especially with the social instinct and the sexual instinct, there's this way that if I, like, to purify the holding environment is purifying the holding environment for everybody as well, you know? Like, I suspect that if you were to have a self-pres 1 that had no social instinct and no sexual instinct, it really would be about purifying my literal environment. But when you've got some social in there, it becomes about purifying the holding environment so that we can finally fucking relax or find whatever. And then with the 2, like, the rejection of gaze is like, you nailed it last time I think we spoke, Emiko, where it was like they're not paying attention to the way you pay attention to them. They're not letting in how you are responding to their behavior, and they're not taking that in as, oh, this might reflect my identity. And so
your evaluation or judgment of them, they're not taking that in.
They're not taking in, they're not taking that in, but also it's like the way to some of the judgment stuff comes in for 2 with the way they handle rejecting gaze but still being a part of the field of gaze is by being the one who offers gaze. And so to offer gaze, you need to be in the right position, so to speak, to offer gaze. You need to be the good, loving, gaze-giving breast. breast gun, milk gun, whatever. Super soaker.
No, it's been opening things up, just trying on the different triads or, the different object relational affects from this point of view, because it's like really clarifying the way to look at it.
One of the things that Josh and I have been talking about, and I know that we've all talked about, and I'm closing my eyes to hold on to the thought, but something you're saying about these centers, these hornevians, like maybe, like, I don't know, this is not fleshed out, but like, this may be why 7 and 8 are next to each other, because something about, like, there's a common aim in a certain way in finding the right orientation to the good stuff, and that creates an assertive type in the head center, and being like, and creating the holding environment for oneself in the body center. Yeah, there's a natural syntony or whatever the word is there. I wonder if that could be applied to all, like, 1 and 2 and 5 and 4, if there's like that kind of thing there.
Yeah, because when I think of, like, David likes to say 8 is like to bust up the old format, or old format, or bust up the old themes. And that feels a little bit, I mean, I think all 8s do that to a certain degree, but there's a centralizing effect that 8-wing-9 or outcome or power base that 8-wing-9 is going for, because the attachment means that I need to be the center of some expanding power base, and we don't move. Whereas 8-wing-7 is got this, I think that when I said leverage point, it has an 8-7 quality of, when you combine 7 and 8, is you have these points that I can move around freely, where I'm not tied to one sort of like central power base, but it's got this frustration with orientation thing going on, where I have multiple options to apply leverage where I can get certain results done. And I'm mercurial, and I'm not tied to any one position. So you can't really like come at a central, like the 8-wing-9 thing is like an expanding fucking central PowerPoint, like a dictator. That's usually 8-wing-9s that end up in positions like that. 8-wing-7s are kind of like seemingly like, or 7-wing-8s just seemingly not tied to one position quite as much. It's more like, I've got a point here, I've got a point here, I've got a point here, and
Yeah, there's one of the things about like the 8's relationship to the holding environment is that basically, like, the rejection thing is like trying to give themselves room to move around in, where they're in their own holding environment, right? And so like, it really, gives me the image of like, you're like kind of like shaking your fucking shoulders or something, trying to like just fuck off kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's got that 7 restlessness thing close by, you know what I mean? Like it's interesting from the 8-9 point of view of like, all right, if I'm trying to make room, but I'm also attached, it's like, I don't know.
You're much more invested in, because I noticed this with my sister. It feels like she's much more affected by the environment, people's opinions and things like that. So she's much more controlling than I am.
Yeah.
She has to be, because she's more affected. Whereas it feels like the field of what affects me is much smaller. And so where I find I'm looking for leverage, I don't need as much leverage as she does, and I have leverage in many different places. And so that doesn't feel like I don't feel as much as like I'm having to protect as much as she does. Like, she's much more vigilant about like, no, you don't cross those boundaries, because she's much more affected, I think.
Yeah, 8-7 has like mercurial leverage, like like moving target leverage.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you think 8-wing-9s, even if they're like social blind, could still be a little bit more like hierarchy oriented because of that carving out my place on the mountain or something?
I just think in general, 8-9 is much more affected by the power game, it feels like to me. Yeah, like she's even just like the slightest amount of, I mean, maybe because she's got 6 and 3, but it feels the 8-wing-9s that I've seen, like what creates someone, or what is the drive that creates a dictator? I mean, just to really think about like how vigilant from a power. I mean, I'm just trying to imagine what it would take for me to do something like that, and it feels very specific to 8-wing-9. Whereas, like, you really have to be sensitive and vigilant to so many different, like, the environment and people as objects in the environment to build a power base like that. I don't think it's something that would come easy to an 8-wing-7. Like, that's a very specific to 8-wing-9 type of thing.
It's got more of a chip on its shoulder because it does have attachment.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to mention attachment too, and I think that's why it is a bit more still, is because there is like a sort of antenna out for the status quo and maintaining it. You know, whereas like a 7-wing, it could be said that a 7-wing is just not as interested in keeping that kind of power because that would get boring.
Yeah. You have to maintain it. That's
right. Yeah.
We should be like, let's invite Emika's sister on here to just talk about being 8-wing-9, and then she just like takes over the podcast. Just
like I mean, that would be such a. She's just much more conservative than I am because she builds slowly, and whatever she has, she's in control of. So the idea of showing up on a podcast where she doesn't know anybody and she's not like fully prepared, like that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, that's interesting. That. I don't know. Maybe it's self-consciousness, but there is compared to 8-wing-7, more of like a reticent thing. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting because it's kind of like line to 5 flavors of stuff that isn't as much in 8-wing-7. Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting to me how, in some ways, she's much more obviously 8 than I am, but in other ways, she's much more sensitive and much more affected by things than I am. So it's like, yeah, far more controlling, but that's because she is more affected. So
yeah, and then let's see with 1 and 1-wing-9 versus 1-wing-2. I'm trying to think about. There's 1-wing-2 with the purifying the holding environment, while also being the gaze deliverer. Let's see.
That one's a little tougher.
Well, it's partly that's brings the teacher quality to me of that one with the 2.
That was one of our toughest ones that we did. We did 1-wings. That was hard because we don't have
that episode
examples. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think like if there's something that can be excavated from purifying and gaze delivering. You know, of like there's crossover there in the same way that 8 and 7 kind of have, as these centers are adjacent.
It's like, what is 1 and 2? What's the intersection between those two? I guess it underscores the judgment, the finding the right position.
Well, I don't know if this goes anywhere, but like 1 to me is, you know, the voice of God kind of thing, or I know everything that God knows. And then 2 is has a self-image of being angelic or a god or something like that. I don't know. There's something in that kind of goodness.
It's doubling down on the voice of God.
Yeah.
There's also this quality of 1 where, like, 1 is hopeful that the holding is going to come, right? Like 9 is hopeful that part of, all right, so for listeners, I think positive outlook for 2, 7, and 9 is a dumb term. I think hopeful outlook is better because, you know, like how negative and sad 9s can be or whatever, but there's still this kind of, you know,
could have been worse.
It'll be fine. It could have been worse, or this could work out. Like if I just attach hard enough or squint hard enough or whatever, it can work.
It's more like survivability for on the 9 end is just like, I can make it through this. I gotta shrink.
Go to sleep.
Yeah.
So with 1, there's like there is a hopefulness as well. It's like if I can purify the thing, you know, then the holding will come. But in so doing, like there's like let's look for right holding, but then there is something like if I will get the right holding because I like deserve it because I'm so good, like I'm the gaze giver or something like this. There's this sense of the inner angel of fire and judgment or whatever. That's like there seems to be maybe more faith in the purification project than One Wing 9.
Yeah,
because One Wing 9 is. They do adapt a bit. They do numb a little bit to just like sort of make this thing work.
Yeah.
How's that sound, baby?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
I was going to say that One Wing 2 is almost like sacrificing themselves to have that like higher righteousness coming through them.
Yeah, because the types that are double hexading are not wanting to do any of the adapting, so there's more of a I'm the source of it all.
Right. I'm doing the work. I'm taking the brunt for everybody else who's like adapting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There's something there.
It's also that the types that don't have an attachment wing, because they're not porous and not affected by the center. Shit, where was I going with that? Oh, fuck, I lost it.
That's what happens when we riff.
What'd you say, Alexander?
I said the 9 got him.
I touched 9. I was like,
yeah, he got his little wing. And
yeah.
He got sucked in.
Cult of Cream is working. Slowly being infected.
There's something there, though.
Well, all right.
Wing 2 feels like more of a hope provider or imposer, maybe.
Hope imposer. I like
imposer, yeah, that's more correct.
I
don't think provider
is imposition. It's not provider. Well, at least, of course, I'm coming from a triple attachment perspective where I think you're all insane, and selfish and I just feel imposed upon too easily. So, yeah.
Yep.
Well, maybe it's a different form of like reform where, like, like I said, with 8 Wing 9, it's much more of a centralized power base. And so you get the dictator, boss archetype with 8-9. And I'm wondering if 1 Wing 9 is more of a, I'm going to stay in one spot and reform this environment, whereas 1-2 is out there trying to, you know what I'm saying? So,
go ahead, David.
1 Wing 9 feels like it's going into sort of a removed idyllic whatever cogitation about what the holding environment could be, and it stays in more abstract space. Whereas the 1-2 is the hands-on imposition on everyone.
Yeah, I think of like Noam Chomsky's a 1 Wing 9, right?
I would think so. Yeah.
So he's like, he's like making commentary and stuff like this, but he's still very soft spoken and
removed.
He's removed, but he's still like, he's not like Bernie on TV, like we don't have healthcare in this country or whatever. He's just kind of like very like gently critiquing and kind of trying to bring things in a certain direction, but it's still like kind of in one spot, like. One of the things that is interesting just about Bernie as a 1-2 is like how energetic he is.
Yeah.
Just like he's still playing basketball and he's just all over the place. And like there was recently like going around viral was like some girl and some like
I was just gonna bring that up.
Yeah, some doorman in New York were like doing a TikTok dance, and like Bernie just got caught in it or something, and he just walks up and he gives it one look and he just. He's like, no.
It's an absolute look of disdain too. He was like, just go by.
This is kind of bringing up the correlation to me between 2 and 7. Like 2 and 7 are dispersed, have a, big dispersion energy or multiplicity kind of thing, where 2 is like about multiple relationships, right? You know what I mean? And it's got that the thing talked about before. 2 and 7 are the widest open angles on the symbol. So so there's that. As far as like you're talking about, John, 1 with a 9 is sort of in one place. 1 with a 2 is in more places, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
This was kind of from when we did the wings episodes too. But 1 wing 9 is also just going to be more responsive to what needs reforming because it's more aware of the state of everything due to the 9 wing.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, whereas like 1 wing 2, it's possible that it could just have more energy because it's not picking up on the environment. It's just coming up with its own shit, you know,
It's just
and then
plowing
just imposing it. You know, and a similar thing with like 8 wing 7 and 8 wing 9. 8 wing 9 is maybe going to be more like aggressive about its leverage and about its control because it can sense all the ways that it is vulnerable.
Yeah.
Whereas 8 wing 7 doesn't really pick up on that vulnerability as much. It's just double imposing. It's just picking whatever it wants to control and then controlling it.
Yeah, because I think 8-9 is more of an effective boss archetype because when you think about like, because when you think about like the 8 fixation, what makes sense is that there's an environment and you're controlling the boundaries of that environment and you're at the center and you're, tracking the boundaries. Whereas 8-9s make more sense. Like there are more 8-9s and when 8-9s are really doing their thing, it works better. But 8-7 is sort of saying, core 8, I'm still looking at the boundaries, but what if we don't have boundaries and we just control certain power zones that effectively act as boundaries, but we're not actually manning a sealed environment? So it's like, for example, let's say you have a trade agreement. The 8-9 is going to want to control every port of the country. It feels like 8-9s have to control all the pieces because that's the only way you can guarantee that everything is under control in an environment. So it feels like if you actually wanted to make sure that things went your way, you'd have to do it the 8 wing 9 way because you're actually sensitive to the whole system. Whereas 8 wing 7s are like, I can move fast enough. I don't have to, do all that. I can just
8 wing 7s are the arms dealers that are like, getting with their
right. It's an interesting thing though that the sensitivity is more of a thing with 8-9, and that's part of why they are more controlling because you're gonna have to do something about that vulnerability.
Yeah. They're also way less active.
Because to me, it's like, all right, you hit me here, I'm gonna move.
Right.
I don't need to deal with that. I'm just not gonna give a shit about it. I'll move on.
Yeah, and there's the 7 wing 2 of 8 wing 7 too of like, I don't like this. That's boring. Bye.
It's like, okay.
Later. You're out. Reactively reject the thing I'm bored by. Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point that 8 wing 9s, like 8 in general, gets this reputation of being very clear on their preferences. But I think 8 wing 7 is very clear on their preferences, whereas 8 wing 9s often get carried like. So something that we're unpacking in rejection, and this is not to say other types know themselves better, but that like rejection types get into a thing where it's like they don't know themselves outside of their rejection offering. You know what I'm saying? Like I am I don't know how to be other than my offering because I haven't like explored my like a 5. It's just all their stuff they're offering, their information and stuff like this. But it's like one of the ways you know yourself in a certain sense is like your preferences, right? Reacting to certain things. And so like I've met 8 wing 9s that there's a bit of blankness from the point of view of not in touch with basically who they are apart from whatever their little fiefdom power consolidation thing is. Yeah.
I mean, I could see my 8 sister relating to a lot of 9. Just we've had conversations because it feels like my preferences are really loud. Like I like this, I don't like this, and I'll ask her questions like, on a Saturday morning when you don't have to do anything, what are you doing? Like, what are you interested in? And she has to think about it for a while, and she'll tell me, I like this thing over here. it just feels like it's like with like a 9, like you have to dig it out of her, like to get her to like that. This is a hexad type, right? Like, but when it comes to productive, this is what needs to be done. She's far more aware of that because she doesn't care about, her preferences are really, off to the wayside somewhere. She's very aware of what situations needs. I'm aware of that stuff, but I feel like I get sidetracked by, all right, I don't want to do that. Not interested in that, much more easily. And she's like, she's just much more practical.
How about the 4 or 5 space? Is there anything we can do there?
I like what you said, John, that your separateness of identity is also augmented by, I want to make sure I get the right word, by a separateness of perception, I think is what you might have said.
Yeah.
And so those two together is like how you orient to your identity is rejecting any exogenous form of perception. And that felt like a clarifying way to explain 4 or 5.
Because when you do that, like, what can you construct identity on? And I think it's like, it's not only super subjective, but it's kind of like super symbolic too, right? Because, like, what do you naturally produce if you're just rejecting everything from the outside to base a self on? And so, like, I have a bunch of like symbols that I made up myself that are like showed up in artwork and stuff like this that I tattooed on myself, and they're like, oh, these are coming from me, this kind of a thing. But I think it does make like that 4 wing 5, 5 wing 4 arena very like symbolic, and I'm trying to distinguish it from the 9 symbolic, but there is a bit of like a symbolism that does not lend to interpretation in a certain way. Like, I'm trying not to just talk about myself, but I don't have a whole lot of other like 4s to talk. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
Well, there is a way that like 9 symbolism is all inclusive. Like everyone can project whatever 9 they want into it.
It's totally the opposite. I mean, the obvious thing is that it's totally the opposite in the sense that 9 is going for the universal symbol, and also the universal symbol that has always existed forever.
Yes.
Yes. Right. Whereas the 4, it's like starting the day you're born. Totally the opposite. Yeah.
Totally. No, I remember, and it's specifically just non-inclusive. I'm including fucking nothing in this.
I remember on the zone where Alexander and I met when we were in my room, and I was like going to my drawing pad with her, and I can't remember. Do you remember what I was talking about? Where I was like extrapolating on certain symbolism, something or other, and I was just going
Not
off.
Specifically, no, I wasn't paying attention to what we were saying.
Ouch.
Hey,
do you remember this big, meaningful moment?
We're just in a lust gaze.
Yeah, yes. John was looking at me and I'm like, oh my God, this is dangerous. I don't know what he's saying, but I'm just going to look affirming here.
Just going to nod my head.
I'm kind of kidding. I'm kidding a little bit. I remember you were talking about your art, but no, I don't remember the specifics of it.
It was like, I just remember a little bit about like the hyper personalness of it that I was like unpacking in this very frenzied way. And you were just like,
Yeah, I mean, even going back to the symbol thing, like, not, there's like the cross and like the symbol and, fucking triangles or whatever other 9s do. And then John, the symbol tattooed onto his arm is, you will never find it anywhere else because he fucking tattooed it onto his arm based on his own, just where he was just being led.
Narcissism.
Another thing for wing 5, and John, I'm sure you can unpack this more too, is that like, 4 separates, right? And it distinguishes themselves against other things, or not even against. It just is trying to distinguish itself always. Maybe it's possible that 4 wing 5 is inventing, actually. Like there is a way that 4 wing 5 is like self-discovering and inventing themselves and their own perception. Whereas forming, and I've kind of covered this before, but like forming 3 in a way is just distinguishing, and the difference there is that to distinguish, you have to be aware of the other thing that you're turning against, you're turning away from. So like forming 3 always knows that they're different because they know what everybody's doing. And in a way, forming 5 kind of doesn't know how different they are. And it kind of doesn't know how separate they are. Like they I don't know, it's like they know that they're different because it came from them. But John, you can, like I said, you can kind of unpack this, but like a thing that you've been unpacking and discovering on your own is just how separate from everything you've been. You know, and that seems to just like continue to have layers.
Yeah, like this is not like oh, this is cool thing, because it's like, I think sometimes the projection on 4 or 5 is like, oh, they're so separate, don't they? Isn't that cool? Like cool or something or whatever. And so there's a couple things in what you said, Alexander, that come up. I mean, for one, that is the thing that I keep figuring out, is like how not on the same page I've been in a way that's been debilitating. Like there's obviously before I want to be not on the same page, but there's also ways that I didn't pick up on. I didn't have like the distinguishing mechanism of this is what I want to separate from versus this is what I want to figure out. It was like I just was separate.
Right. But, and it's a different it would be a different story if you like knew what it was and knew how it worked and then turned away from it versus just not having it to begin with.
And then, but also you said something about inventing, and that actually hit something that I hadn't articulated, where not so much now because just I'm older, but also like I think inner work helps a lot. But and just in terms of just being like having a clear sense of my own energy that's not based on reactions or whatever. But when I was younger, I felt a lot of struggle around my own authenticity, because there was this thing of that this word inventing self gets at, where like things would come out of me, but then I would like hold on to them as me too much or something like this, and then create like a little narrative to try to understand myself through the lens of this thing that came up through me. And then, but that like the time where that interpretation made sense would pass, you know what I'm saying? And so there's this thing of like, I'm absolutely empty and fake and full of nothing, because there are these things I'm trying to kind of like turn into a self that are coming out of me, but I'm not knowing where to place them or how to hold them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like too much invention, and so there's no stable self.
Yeah.
It's like trying to like map something that's ephemeral, and if it's a moment, you can only like evoke, and it's not always going to be relevant once the moment is passed.
Right.
And I was thinking about that for 5-4 and 5-6. I was having a conversation with there's a German 5 in the group I did follow-up session with, and we ended up having like an extra hour-long conversation, because he's actually he's 5-wing 6, but he had like my opposite or my demon functions in OPS, and so we started talking about that. And then we ended up talking about the Enneagram, so I ended up talking to him about his experience of 5-wing 6 and what his impression of 5-wing 4 is. And he said that something that was helpful to me, 5s are all abstracting, but for 5-wing 6, with the attachment wing, there's a judgment of whether the abstraction is useful to an objective map, either pre-existing or created by the 5. But there's a sense of like, this thing has to be functional towards some kind of map that I'm either creating or already exists. And so you get a lot of, even with 5-wing 6s that are artistic, is kind of like a critique of how to abstract something. So like Susan Sontag is like one of the most famous 5-wing 6, at least we have her as 5-wing 6. And she's written some like really interesting books about like, I think on photography, or just like how even the act of taking a photo of something changes the way we perceive things. And so there's like a critique, like we just talked about, like attachment to judgment or orientation that's influencing the way that 5-wing 6 is abstract. And I was thinking about like 5-4 and this, inventing, trying to evoke something that's ephemeral. Like you have to, it's almost like I'm relying on something that has its own internal logic that not necessarily better, but it's kind of like I have to, how I'm abstracting is pulling from some sort of separate identity. So it has to make sense only to itself.
And it's usually aesthetic, because on that abstract level, like what renders sense, right, is like something like
you can't explain necessarily.
Yeah, it becomes an aesthetic.
It's pinging your personal aesthetic.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah, 4554 space has always felt to me like sand running through someone's hand. Like, because it doesn't have the anchor to the whole attachment world, the basic elemental stuff of humanity. So it's just constantly crumbling. Yeah. And so that kind of gets at the continual self-reinvention or something.
Yeah.
But I think like y'all can see my ridiculous room and stuff, and like there's this sort of reinforcing self through symbols thing that's happening, like through my, like, I don't have as much art up as I used to, but like it would just be this kind of echo chamber of my own narcissistic inner life that would just be, the reinforcing symbolic whatever feeding on itself that would just kind of that would replicate or be in place of having like a body.
No, and that makes sense, because the thing I'm talking about with sand running through the hands is like it's relative to the outside world, whereas there is an inner symbolic space that has some solidity to it.
Yeah. And the problem with that, it's hard to translate that sort of ephemeral, like evoking momentary thing to anything that would be useful. With like 5-6 and 4-3, there's you can distinguish yourself in the outside world in a way that you can plant something and be like, all right. Yeah. Whereas the 5-4 space, like, it's really ambiguous and overly personal in a way that doesn't, that it's hard to build on.
Yeah. Yeah, there's almost no place to put it. And that also explains why 4554 can have such a strong aversion to the outside, because on the opposite end, they don't have a place to put themselves in the world either.
True.
Right.
Like trying to like fit into these like pre-existing things that everybody else understands, but they have not given themselves like the time or the interest or whatever, just like having the inner mechanisms or interest to understand what's going on outside makes it that much like scarier in a way. Which reinforces this thing of like, I don't belong there. I have to keep inventing this thing that makes sense for myself in here.
Right.
And then there's me.
What about you?
I don't know. I just wanted to
bring it back to herself.
Bring it back to the queen.
Bring it back to the queen. The cult of queen.
Bring the planets back into circling her.
Just in case we forgot what this was always all going to be about. It's about the nine.
The cult leader.
It's called the cult of nine.
The cult of nine.
That needs to be on a t-shirt.
It does.
Cream cult.
Cream cult.
Oh, I would wear that t-shirt.
Man.
I would wear that t-shirt to the gym and force people to ask me about it.
Oh man.
Cream is queen,
That should be on the back of the t-shirt.
Nice. Okay. I'm even thinking of this, just not merch and stuff like that, but I'm thinking of like the 4554 thing, and the 87 and the 21 kind of thing in response to 369. And all of that, and how it is a different, like the double hexad really does have its own hell, because it doesn't know how to orient to like a collective space. Like 4-5 has it in a very dramatic way because they're underground, right? But 8-7, 7-8, 1-2, 2-1 also has like a specific resistance they're not really always aware of. And anyway, I think 369 has a different kind of hell in the sense that everything in a way is very easy because we do know how to pick up on everything that's going on. And so the resistance and like the challenge and the fear comes from having to locate and give up some of that ease. Of course, I'm speaking from 9, but like, yeah, no, I don't think 9 has it any easier than 3 because 3 is active. But yeah, anyway, I can't flesh that out anymore, but it does kind of
You mean
ping
give up some
something.
of that ease? You mean give up like going along?
Yeah, a kind of like using other people's holding environments, other people's orientations, working off of other people's gaze, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That having to like locate and use my own in any of those ways is exposing myself to resistance. You know, is like pushing, having to force myself into a certain kind of struggle. Yeah, I don't know the rest of that. But it does feel like the opposite problem of hexad, where hexad is kind of learning how to flow and go with things and know what's going on. Whereas the attachment thing is learning how to turn off the awareness of what's going on, and work off of their own motivations in resistance. I don't know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's one thing that when Josh was on DAA, was that you could define the type wing combinations by the object relational affect that they're missing. And so,
yeah,
8-7's missing attachment. That's the thing that I need to, almost like a stacking of object relations. So like I have a attachment blind spot.
Yeah, I have a rejection blind spot.
Yeah, just that's what you need to integrate there is that last object relational affect.
Gotta reject. Yeah, I think rejection is the type I have, is the OR I have the least of. I think I only have that special 5 wing on my 6 fix. It makes me so special.
Makes you so cool.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that feels pretty rich.
Yeah, there's plenty there. I can shape an episode out of that.
I was curious, did you get your OPS typing or submit that or something?
Oh, no. Yeah.
OPS is like close enough that it's still interesting to me, but I'm like recognized I'm like losing interest in it. And so I want to do like an episode sooner than later where we go over it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nancy,
I'd like to do that.
we can get you, if you get your video done before the 1st.
I can't do it before the 1st. I guarantee you. Sorry. We're moving into the new place.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Oh,
that's right.
And then another thing I was thinking about, I don't know, Alexander and I have been talking about romantic relationship stuff lately. And I don't know, there might be a revisiting of soul intercourse kind of ideas. You know, and I don't know if that's something that we want to do as a group or Alexander and I want to do just together.
I think doing it as a group would be cool. I think we all have different things to say. I just finished a book called All About Love by Bell Hooks. It was like popular not too long ago.
Yeah.
Is that a nonfiction?
Yeah. And there were some like good points in there that I could probably just pull up. But one of the things John and I were talking about the other day was the effect of capitalism and consumerism on our ideas of love.
Yeah.
And how we have all grown up with basically the commodification of love. And how we all think we're looking for love, but really what we're looking for is a partner to just have all of our needs met. And a partner to just give us what we want.
Have a stable roommate.
Yeah.
Oof.
Or like life
like
enhancement, like lifestyle enhancement accessory.
Yeah. Yeah, just like basically a product, you know, that's all it is. Whereas love is something much more, first of all, it doesn't belong to any of the instincts. I think for a little bit there, I thought it was the social instinct because I'm full of myself.
I'm glad you admitted it.
Yeah. What, that I'm full of myself? I knew that. But anyway, yeah, it is deeper than any of the 3 instincts. Anyway, kind of lost my train of thought, but I think that kind of conversation would be interesting to revisit, especially as we've all had more experience and lived more life since last time we had that conversation.
I guess one of the things that's come up in like conversations Alexander and I have had that I feel naturally happens here is just that there are topics like love and relationships that everybody cares about, and then there's a lot of point of view and perspective and whatever on sexuality, things like this. But like because those fields don't have the enneagram or they don't have the instincts, when they're talking,
they're
like
shallow.
Yeah, they're shallow. They're missing something. Their ideal audience or their ideal sense of what's normal is based on their own type or attachment or sexual blind or sexual dominant or whatever it is. But it gives such more precise distinctions for navigating certain other topics, and so it might be useful to like start keeping an ear out for those kinds of topics that people go to the well for, and kind of like be the ones to put it out there first.
Right. Yeah, we should do stuff on relationships. I mean, we can just do soul intercourse, episodes, because it's just a big topic. This is something that people think about a lot, and
and it's also just like, not to be so nine about it, but it also is like the universal, yearning. Everybody, whether they're afraid of it and have given up on it or have calcified themselves to it, everybody still wants it. And is still like obsessed with either reacting against it or searching for it actively.
Yeah.